Where did the drama in the Brown family really start? More than a decade ago, audiences witnessed the Brown family fighting through the complicated dynamics of plural marriage, real estate squabbles, and on-camera conflict while they put on a front of togetherness for the world. Each tear, each fight, and each milestone shared was filmed, aired, and sold as family entertainment. But beneath the surface, a tempest was brewing, one that had nothing to do with ratings, cameras, or even polygamy itself. It was about justice, about accountability, and about one woman, Meri Brown, saying she had had enough. For years she'd been ignored, her needs minimized, and her voice silenced. Beneath the cheerful smiles and staged family meetings on sister wives, Meri had been living with financial insecurity, emotional neglect, and growing realization that the life televised was far different from the one she knew. The recent court proceedings threatened to bare the facade of that life, and when Meri walked into the courtroom, papers clutched in her hand and eyes blazing with determination, there was a nearly palpable force, a tension that even the seasoned reporters who were reporting the story could feel. Something was about to give, and everyone present in that room knew it. The courtroom itself was a study in contrasts: polished wood, vaulted chambers, and the subdued buzz of anticipation. On one side, Kody Brown sat with his usual air of controlled confidence, flanked by his legal team and Robyn, whose composure betrayed none of the tension in her own mind. On the other side, Meri's attorney quietly briefed her, pointing to exhibits, transcripts, and ledgers that would reveal the depths of mismanagement, favoritism, and deceit. The first moments of testimony seemed almost ceremonial. Pleasantries were exchanged, procedural notes were made, and then it began, the slow, deliberate unfolding of a story that would shake the foundation of everything the family had presented to the public. Meri's opening words were measured, her voice calm but charged with emotion. "Enough is enough," she said, looking directly at Cody. That simple phrase, repeated in hushed tones, sent a ripple through the courtroom. Journalists scribbled frantically, camera crews adjusted lenses, and even the judge, known for a stoic demeanor, raised an eyebrow. This wasn't just another episode of reality television spilling into real life. This was a reckoning. The courtroom fell silent as Meri's attorney began presenting evidence, documents that traced years of financial decisions, questionable expenditures, and patterns of favoritism that had long been whispered about but never proven. Every page she showed the judge was a story of Cody's serial decisions that worked for one side of the family while leaving Meri and her kids in limbo, of accounts and transfers that seemed intended to obscure the truth, and of Robyn's involvement in foundational decisions that had been a source of tension behind doors for years. Meri took a breath before speaking again, her voice more level this time, resonating with pain but also resolve. "Your Honor," she said, "I have tried for years to resolve these matters in private. I have tried to protect my children, to keep the peace, and to hold on to the family we promised the world we were. But patience time is over. Enough is enough." Her words carried meaning far beyond the courtroom walls. To the audience at home, it was a shocking instant of vulnerability, one that stripped away the human cost of the reality television circus. In the courtroom, the implications were even more severe. Cody's face, carefully expressionless at first, clenched as he listened. Robyn wriggled in her seat, and her eyes narrowed slightly, betraying worry, or perhaps knowledge of the impact this testimony would bring to bear. The judge, a pedant, leaned forward. "Miss Brown, proceed," he commanded. His tone held no condescension, merely a fierce urgency that the facts be disclosed. And that is what Meri proceeded to do. She took the court through account statements, highlighting discrepancies, unexplained transfers, and areas where promises made in the interest of familial harmony had not been honored. Each illustration was followed by her own testimony to the emotional toll of these decisions: missed birthdays, canceled plans, and the subtle erosion of her sense of stability. It was meticulous, methodical, and deeply human. Observers watching at home were struck by the contrast. On television, Sister Wives had always shown a polished, almost curated version of events: happy family moments, occasional disagreements, dramatic but resolved conflicts. Now, with Meri's voice filling the courtroom, that illusion began to crumble. Viewers could see the strain, the sacrifices, and the injustice that had long simmered beneath the surface. The testimony was punctuated by moments of raw emotion. Meri's hands shook slightly as she referenced personal journals, letters, and emails, evidence that highlighted not just financial mismanagement, but a pattern of emotional neglect and control. "I am not here to attack anyone," she said, voice quivering but firm. "I am here to ask for justice, for my children, for myself, and for the truth." The courtroom atmosphere shifted as Meri's words sank in. Journalists scribbled furiously. Courtroom sketch artists captured every detail, and even Cody's legal team exchanged subtle glances that betrayed unease. For months, rumors of tension had swirled online, but here it was, on public record, undeniable and precise. Meri paused to gather her thoughts, scanning the room. Her children sat beside her, their faces mixed with pride and fear. They had grown up in front of cameras, learning early that their family's story was often viewed through producers' eyes. Today, the cameras were simply witnesses to truth, and her words were her own. "Your Honor," she continued, her voice now stronger, "these are not just numbers on a page, these are the consequences of broken trust. They are the moments my children have endured confusion, fear, and disappointment since decisions were made without regard for their well-being. Enough is enough." There was a pause in the courtroom. Even the bailiffs, who had seen their fair share of dramatic hearings, seemed momentarily caught up in her testimony. Cody's posture remained rigid, but the subtle clenching of his jaw indicated he was attentive to every word. Robyn, too, appeared increasingly tense, her eyes flicking toward the documents as if hoping some detail might mitigate the unfolding narrative. Meri's attorney stepped in, guiding the judge through a sequence of financial transfers that had been strategically timed to benefit certain family members over others. Each revelation was met with careful consideration by the court. Questions were asked, clarifications made, but Meri's presence dominated the room. Not through anger, but through an unwavering insistence on accountability. The audience online and at home felt the weight of the moment. Comments flooded social media. "Meri is finally standing up. This is what real courage looks like. Cody looks like he can't believe what's happening." The engagement metrics spiked as viewers were drawn to the raw, unfiltered confrontation that had long been teased but never fully realized in the media. Meri's approach was strategic yet deeply personal. She alternated between presenting hard evidence and sharing intimate anecdotes, moments that humanized the numbers and created an emotional resonance impossible to ignore. "I love my family," she whispered to herself, it seemed, "but I cannot continue to live with decisions that harm us and pretend all is okay. Enough is enough." Her testimony trailed off into a silence in which the judge, the lawyers, and the family had a moment to absorb the weight of her words. Cameras continued to roll, capturing every reaction: Cody's frozen glare, Robyn's subtle frown, and the restrained determination that exuded from Meri herself. Outside the courtroom, audiences debated every detail online. Forums buzzed with talk of the financial records, tearful depositions, and rumored verdicts. Social media clips highlighting Meri's "enough is enough" declaration quickly went viral, generating shares and debates that spanned hours. As the courtroom proceedings resumed, the judge called for a brief recess. Whispers filled the room, and cameras continued to roll, focusing on the subtle reactions of the family. Cody leaned back in his chair, letting his breath out slowly. But Meri's composure never faltered, her eyes burning with a gentle determination that spoke more eloquently than any defense. During the recess, Meri's attorney approached her with a nod of encouragement. "You did great," he said. The court enjoyed the clarity and emotion. "That is exactly what we needed." Meri nodded, her mind already on the next segment of her testimony. There could be no room for tentativeness. Each statement had to be precise, and yet communicate the authority of her experience. When the hearing resumed, the judge asked Meri to describe the specific behaviors she believed had been harmful to the family's financial state and overall well-being. This was the moment she had been preparing for. The chance to lay out not only the legal implications but also the human cost of each decision. "I am not here to attack anyone personally," she began, her voice calm but resolute. "I am here to make sure the truth is understood. For years, I've witnessed choices that benefited a select few while leaving others, my children and I, struggling to maintain stability. The financial problems are just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath that is the emotional strain, the broken promises, and the instances when my children were subjected to needless confusion and suffering." Enough is enough. Her words lingered in the air, potent in their honesty. The The judge nodded, signaling that the court understood the gravity of her words. Cody's eyes grew narrow, a flicker of distress crossing his face as he realized the full force of the allegations. Robyn's pen hovered over her notebook, expressing a silent concern for the evidence Meri had just laid out. Meri continued, highlighting specific incidents corroborated by documentation and personal accounts. Each example illustrated a pattern: financial decisions made in secret, choices made that prioritized some family members over others, and the domino effect those choices had on her children's lives. The court needs to understand, she leaned forward, her intensity undiminished. This isn't blame for the sake of blame. This is about responsibility. It is about ensuring what has happened can no longer go on unchecked. Enough is enough. Outside the courtroom, social media exploded once again. Clips of Meri's testimony began trending on multiple platforms. Viewers reacted not just to the legal content, but to the raw emotion she conveyed. Her bravery in standing up against decades of family dynamics that had long been hidden from public view. Hashtags like #EnoughIsEnough and #MeriSpeaks dominated conversations, taking the reach of her words far beyond the physical courtroom. Next court day began with a feeling of anticipation hanging in the air. Reporters jostled to get in place, cameras at the ready to capture every word, while family members still wore their carefully constructed masks. Meri stepped in, though, with quiet confidence, ready to resume the testimony that had already caused a stir in the courtroom. The judge requested that Cody answer the allegations of Meri. His lawyer rose, trying to set up the narrative of misunderstanding and miscommunication. "Your Honor," Cody's lawyer began. "While Ms. Brown's concerns are appreciated, we feel that most of these concerns are subjective interpretations, rather than discrepancies based on fact." Cody squirmed in the seat, his eyes finding Meri periodically. Her eyes met his briefly hard, immovable. There was no fear, no doubt, just determination. The room held its collective breath as Meri rose to respond. "My words yesterday were not said lightly," Meri replied, her voice cutting through the courtroom murmurs. "I have proof, I have records, and I have my children's life experiences to help bear out the truth. This isn't a matter of perception. This is a matter of reality." She brought out charts, receipts, and timelines meticulously recorded over the period of months. Every document echoed a trend of choices with actual impacts on the family's finances and daily life. The judge read them carefully, interrupting from time to time to ask clarifying questions, signaling to the court that Meri's accusations were being seriously considered. "What I am asking the court to consider," Meri continued, "is not just the money lost or opportunities missed. It is the psychological and emotional impact on the children, on me, and on the integrity of this family. Secrets were kept, decisions were made without consultation, and promises were broken over and over again. Enough is enough. The cycle cannot continue." The courtroom reacted discreetly but perceptibly. Cody's jaw tightened, his fists balled up beneath the table. Robyn scribbled notes furiously, perhaps in an attempt to create a rebuttal. Meanwhile, the judge maintained a neutral demeanor, but leaned forward slightly, signaling engagement and attentiveness to Meri's testimony. Outside, social media audiences continued to dissect every word. Clips of Meri passionately explaining her position were uploaded in real time. Fans and critics alike debated her statements, but one sentiment was clear: her courage in speaking out had struck a chord. Comments flooded in. "Finally, someone says it," and Meri's bravery is unmatched. Undefined, the courtroom drama had transcended its walls, becoming a viral moment in the ongoing saga of the family. By midday, the atmosphere in court had shifted. Undefined Meri's evidence and eloquence left Cody's side scrambling for a counter-narrative. Undefined observers noted that the dynamic had changed. This was no longer just another legal proceeding. It was a confrontation where the truth, as Meri articulated it, held undeniable weight. After the lunch recess, the courtroom reconvened. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the room itself knew the weight of what was about to unfold. Cody's legal team seemed more cautious now. Aware that Meri's meticulously documented evidence had set a high bar, the judge called the session to order. "We will continue with Ms. Brown's testimony. Please go on." Meri rose, dominating the room's attention without having to raise her voice. She began with a personal story, a tale that made the information she'd already presented more understandable. When my daughter wept herself to bed because she didn't understand why promises weren't kept, that was when I realized the impact wasn't just about numbers. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust, safety, and love. The room fell silent, even Cody appeared shaken, his own tranquility upset by naked emotion in Meri's voice. The judge nodded solemnly, acknowledging the weight of her opinion. Meri shifted gears, invoking patterns she had documented over years. Repeated financial decisions, furtive behavior, and one-way decisions have generated havoc. I am not accusing out of spite. I am doing this for the health of my children and the integrity of this family. This destructive cycle of secrecy and unilateral control has to stop. She stood before the judge, clutching her binder of evidence she had assembled. The pages spoke volumes: canceled bills, unexplained withdrawals, promise after promise broken. I've documented every occurrence. I have nothing to conceal. This is the day-to-day reality we live with, Your Honor. Cody's attorney attempted to counter, but the words faltered. The judge interrupted graciously. Please allow Miss Brown to finish her testimony. We will get to your answers later. Meri took a deep breath and continued. I have done everything I can try to communicate, to mediate, to find solutions within the family, but every effort has been met with deflection or dismissal. I've had enough. Enough is enough. For my children's sake, for transparency's sake, I stand here today calling for accountability. The television cameraman caught every moment. Social media erupted with reaction to her speech. Videos of Meri saying, "Enough is enough," went up thousands of times in minutes. Fans tweeted, "She finally spoke the truth, and this is the courage we wanted to see." The theater of the courtroom had become a cultural phenomenon, fueling the discussion far beyond justice's borders. Meri returned to her seat after giving her testimony. Her face was still serene, but a mix of relief and determination shone from her eyes. She had delivered her message briefly and loudly, leaving little room for misinterpretation. The judge noted, occasionally glancing up to ensure the court appreciated fully the gravity of her utterances. The atmosphere within the court remained strained as the new phase began. Cody's legal team approached with reserve, their accustomed confidence significantly diminished. Every word Meri had spoken echoed still in the room, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The judge addressed the courtroom. Now we will allow cross-examination, but I hope to observe some decorum. This is a hearing of facts, not of melodrama. Cody's lead attorney stood and began tentatively. Miss Brown, you've made some strong accusations about finances and secrecy. Do you have specific instances where these events specifically affected your children? Meri's eyes met with the attorney's unwavering. Yes, she answered softly. I've cited all occurrences. For instance, last year my child's school fee was held up quite noticeably. I found out about this only after repeated follow-ups. The holdup not only posed logistical issues but distressed the child emotionally. These cases are not isolated. Such is their pattern. The lawyer tried to sidetrack. But may not these have been administrative errors rather than intentional? Meri shook her head. Intentionally or not, the result is the same. The children were destabilized and trust within the family broke down. That is all that is pertinent here. She paused to allow those words to hang in the air. I am not here to demonize anyone. I am here today to present reality as it happened, and to offer for the future accountability and openness. A hush settled over the room as she opened another section of her binder. Photographs, receipts, and letters were spread before them, each one a silent affirmation of her narrative. The judge leaned in, center stage, studying the details. Also, Meri moved focus from papers and numbers to emotions. The real human cost. Some are unquantifiable. The sleepless nights my children endured. The fear of not knowing. The sense of betrayal. These are tangible. I am driven to speak out lest silence amount to complicity. The spectators in the courtroom were visibly shaken. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others nodded, seized by the gravity of her words. The cameras captured the moment with precision, ensuring that Meri's message would reach the public unfiltered. Even Cody's team struggled for an effective counter. Each attempt seemed inadequate against the combined weight of her evidence and heartfelt testimony. The courtroom was no longer just a legal arena. It had become a moral stage where right and wrong were being weighed openly. Meri concluded this segment of her testimony with a firm declaration. Enough is enough. My children deserve to know the truth. They deserve stability. And I am no longer going to remain silent as decisions are made in secret affecting their lives. The judge took copious notes and nodded in agreement. Thank you, Miss Brown. Your evidence is sharp and persuasive. We will proceed with utmost caution with the balance of this hearing. As the cross-examination ceased, Meri took a moment to compose herself. The weight of the courtroom, the blinding cameras, and the 1,000 eyes upon each step could have easily conquered her, but she stood firm. Her resolve was unbreakable, fueled by years of clandestine wars and hidden truths. The judge turned to Cody, inviting him to step up. Mr. Brown, it is your turn to respond to Miss Brown's testimony. Tell the truth and be brief. Cody rose, his face tightened. He had honed this, but the force of Meri's evidence seemed to unsettle even the most seasoned of defense. His own voice, when it came at last, was controlled but unrespected. Your Honor, I acknowledge some of the charges leveled, but many of them are exaggerated or quoted out of context. I have always acted in the best interests of the family. Meri's eyes didn't blink as she responded where she was sitting. Best interests? Your Honor, I ask that you look at the recorded delays, the mismatches in money, and the times when communication was withheld. These are facts, not exaggerations. The air in the room grew thick. The judge held up a hand, soothing. Let us stick to facts, Miss Brown. Give one brief example. Meri leaned forward, opening a second folder. Last June, the children were enrolled in summer camps that required pre-registration payment. Cody was aware, but payments were delayed without explanation. My repeated inquiry was ignored for weeks. Program directors had to address the issue directly. As a result, my children missed valuable learning experiences, the court murmured quietly. It was one thing to speak generally about disputes. It was another to present evidence that could be independently verified. Meri's testimony was structured, factual, and emotionally compelling. A combination that left the courtroom attentive and tense. Cody's attorney interjected, attempting to shift blame. Miss Brown, could these not have been accidental oversights or miscommunications? Surely, there was no ill intent. Meri's tone grew firmer. Intent does not erase consequences. Whether it was by mistake or not, the consequences are still evident on the children. All actions have their repercussions. Enough is enough. Her gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with the judge, the attorney, and even Cody himself. I am here not only for my own sake, but for my children's welfare and the future of our family. This isn't about a vendetta. This is a plea for honesty and responsibility. The judge nodded slowly, visibly impressed by Meri's directness of statement and calmness. Thank you, Miss Brown. Your testimony has been documented. We will continue with further examination of evidence. External to the courtroom, television news teams started gathering, already writing scripts that would center around Meri's stance. The social media crowd began trending #MeriSpeaksOut and #EnoughAsino hashtags to take her message beyond the courtroom walls. Though even among gallery watchers there were whispers of encouragement. Hundreds thanked her for her courage to speak, to stand up to decades of family complexities, and to demand accountability where none was seen before by anyone. The judge called a brief recess to allow everyone to collect themselves. In that brief pause, Meri remained seated, her thoughts racing. She knew that the courtroom drama wasn't just about this single day. It was part of a larger story that had been unfolding for years, filled with tension, misunderstandings, and conflicts that rarely reached the public eye. Cody spoke quietly with his attorney, his usual confidence slightly shaken. There was no denying that Meri's testimony had struck a nerve. Her measured but firm recitation was in strong contrast to the defensive and reactive posture Cody had taken. When the hearings resumed, it was time for presentation of the financial evidence, a phase that could swing the judge's decision radically. Meri's attorney approached the bench with a stack of carefully organized documents, each marked and verified. These documents, the attorney began, demonstrate several instances of mismanagement and misallocation of family resources, some of which directly impacted Miss Brown and her children. We are requesting the court to consider these in current consideration of responsibility, financial responsibility, and custody. We wished the court to consider these in current consideration of responsibility, financial responsibility, and custody. The judge cleaned his glasses and began reading through the papers. He slowly read each page, asking pointed questions to clarify. Miss Brown, could you tell me briefly about the most significant entries which indicate these discrepancies? Meri nodded, her voice hard. Yes, Your Honor. On a number of occasions, the funds meant for school activities, medical expenses, and the household needs were diverted without even taking the trouble of consulting. There are written communications, bank statements, and emails confirming these actions. My attempts to intervene in private were always dismissed or brushed aside. Cody's attorney cut in, attempting to minimize the impact. Your Honor, the accounting does look suspicious, but they were all for the sake of the family unit. Any ambiguity is simply administrative. Meri shook her head. Administrative or otherwise, the outcome was damaging. My children were directly affected. Lost opportunities, delayed health care, and emotional distress cannot be brushed aside as an administrative issue. The courtroom hush that followed was eloquent. Even those who had been skeptical of the conflict found themselves reflecting on the tangible evidence and the emotional weight behind Meri's words. At that moment, a courtroom photographer, usually discreet, captured a photo that would soon circulate online. Meri, composed but resolute, holding her testimony in hand, facing the judge with unwavering determination. The image quickly became symbolic, a visual representation of a mother's courage in the face of adversity. Outside the courtroom, social media buzzed. Fans and critics alike debated, analyzed, and shared snippets of the proceedings. Meri's words, combined with the documented evidence, were creating ripples far beyond the physical confines of the court. The words she kept whispering softly but insistently. Enough is enough, were already a rallying cry for most of those who had been tracking the saga throughout the years. In the meantime, Cody's demeanor indicated an increasing awareness. This was no typical testimony. Meri had set the ground legally and psychologically, placing him in a defensive position, having to respond to not only accusations, but verifiable facts. The judge did finally look up from the papers, signaling the next phase of questioning. We will address each line of finance separately, starting with the irregularities mentioned by Miss Brown. Let's proceed. Meri took a deep breath. She was ready for the questioning. She was sure that this was the dramatic peak of the courtroom, and she intended to stand firm, putting every detail forward in clarity and confidence. The court resumed business with a focused intensity. The judge began reading through every one of the financial entries, and Meri was questioned about the details. She testified precisely, rendering each case of misuse or misallocation of funds exactly as it occurred. Each of the samples was supported by evidence, emails, bank statements, and receipts, and were all specially kept separate to rule out any possibility of doubt. On the 12th of March 2019, added Meri, an amount of $12,000, which was meant to fund my children's medical expenses, was wrongly transferred to settle for a private investment in another piece of property. I didn't know until a bill went unpaid, affecting the children's care. The judge took notes, nodding occasionally as Meri spoke firmly yet calmly during testimony. Cody shifted uncomfortably in his chair, a silent tension building in the courtroom. His attempts to interject were met with polite but firm resistance from the judge, signaling that Meri's testimony had already set a serious tone. Meri's attorney then asked her to describe the emotional toll of these actions. Her voice softened slightly but remained assertive. Beyond the financial impact, Your Honor, the constant uncertainty and mismanagement created a stressful environment for the children. Emotional hurt, compounded by economic abandonment, can't be measured in dollars and cents only. A few murmurs went around the courtroom. The judge paused, allowing the effect of her words to penetrate deeply. Even Cody's legal team looked uneasy, realizing that Meri's testimony went beyond money. It exposed a pattern of behavior affecting the family's well-being. Next, Meri highlighted communication records that proved she had repeatedly attempted to address these issues privately, only to be ignored or dismissed. I tried to have open discussions, to resolve matters civilly, she said. Each time my concerns were minimized or redirected. Enough is enough. I am here to ensure accountability and protection for my children. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. What started as a legal proceeding had morphed into a story of perseverance, maternal courage, and long overdue accountability. Social media, tracking the live updates, exploded with comments supporting Meri's stance, calling her a voice for the voiceless, and praising her composure under pressure. Cody finally spoke, his tone defensive but measured. "Your Honor, I realize Miss Brown's concern, but there were decisions made that were in the best interest of the family as a whole. Any discrepancies are clerical errors, not intentional wrongdoing." Meri responded assertively. "Your Honor, the record speaks of a pattern, not inconsistent mistakes. They were not random errors. They were repetitive behavior which caused tangible harm. Bureaucratic errors do not create financial and emotional turmoil in children." The judge nodded, assuring the court would take the documents seriously. He turned to Cody's attorney. "I will give your objections due consideration, but Miss Brown's well-spoken testimony and facts will have a strong bearing on the determination." Meri took a deep breath. She had argued convincingly, combining emotional reality with factual accuracy. Each word was calibrated, each illustration endorsed, leaving nothing to question as to her intention or the repercussions of Cody's actions. As the hearing concluded, the judge instructed the parties that further evidence would be presented the next week. Undefended Meri exited the courtroom with a subdued determination. She knew the battle was not won, but she had achieved much. Her voice had been heard, and her story was solidly in the record. The following week, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The media presence had grown, cameras positioned to capture every reaction. Sister Wives fans and followers crowded outside, phones broadcasting live updates, hashtags trending as number Meri Brown Court and number Enoughisana Meri arrived early. Reviewing her notes one last time, she'd spent the night before reviewing every document, ensuring that her testimony remained true and compelling. Today, the focus shifted to Cody's financial explanations and the newly submitted evidence. Cody entered with his legal team, his expression controlled, yet there was a subtle tension. He knew Meri's previous testimony had struck a chord, not just in court but across the public sphere. Media murmurs remarked on how the balance of power seemed to be shifting. The judge called the hearing to order, reminding all of the necessity for transparency and accountability. This court will examine all evidence closely. Both parties will be allowed to provide complete explanations of financial and personal matters affecting the family. Cody's attorney began presenting charts, affidavits, and projections designed to map out Cody's thinking on each transaction. He spoke with technical precision, citing figures, percentages, and expected returns. The tone was professional but lacked the emotional weight of Meri's prior testimony. When it was Meri's turn to respond, she did not merely dispute the numbers. She told the human story behind them. "These numbers might look clean on paper," she said, "but the reality is that my children's education, healthcare, and emotional stability were affected. There is an effect behind every dollar, and the record shows ongoing mismanagement." The court went quiet as Meri showed a series of documents that illustrated not just discrepancies, but patterns. Emails recorded repeated attempts to express concerns, and financial reports showed transfers that were unexplained or unauthorized. She laid them out in a clear, chronological narrative, each fact backing up her claim. Cody tried to interrupt, but the judge was quick to step in. "Miss Brown is entitled to deliver her testimony without interruption. Mr. Brown, you will have your opportunity." Meri took a steady breath, her voice firm but restrained. "I am not here to attack," she continued, "but to defend my children and ensure that justice is served. Enough is enough. Patterns of mismanagement and neglect cannot be permitted to continue unchecked. I ask the court to consider not just numbers, but the real human impact on those involved." The courtroom audience rustled. Even some of Cody's supporters seemed to be impressed with her calm and emotional composure. Her argument was effective because it was factual, but appealed to the emotional truth of a mother fighting for her family. The judge leaned back, reviewing the documents that had been filed. He paused prior to addressing the court. "Miss Brown, your testimony has been thorough and truthful. I will weigh all supporting evidence carefully. The impact on the family and the financial accountability demonstrated will be at the center of the decision to be made." Meri exhaled softly, a mix of relief and resolve. Today was another significant step. Her groundwork, emotional sincerity, and systematic presentation had evidently had a powerful impact. On social media outside the courtroom, there was another eruption. Videos of her testimony became viral, as they caught moments like, "Enough is enough," which instantly became the center of discussion and debate on social media. The people heavily supported Meri, acknowledging her strength and steadfast determination for the welfare of her family. Later in the day, the court session moved to cross-examination. Cody's attorney attempted to question Meri's claims, focusing on alleged inconsistencies in dates and financial records. His tone was assertive, bordering on aggressive, aiming to discredit her narrative. Meri listened carefully, never interrupting. She answered each question with calm precision, referencing the exact documents, emails, and records. She had meticulously organized. Each response was concise, leaving no room for ambiguity. On Exhibit B, on the 14th of March, the funds were transferred without prior approval. She testified briefly, her voice steady. The judge listened intently, jotting down notes occasionally, showing that he was considering her seriously. The tension in the room was palpable. It was clear this testimony carried a great deal of weight in the case. At one point, Cody himself tried to say something, leaning forward in his seat. "Your Honor, he began, but was interrupted by the judge. "Mr. Brown, the court will hear you in its own time. Allow the witness to continue." Meri took a breath and shifted positions slightly, using the moment to repeat her central thrust. "Your Honor, this is not an issue of personal vendettas or attacks," she continued. "It is an issue of accountability. Time and again, I have called for clarity and fairness. Yet decisions were made without transparency, affecting the lives of my children and family members. Enough is enough." The courtroom grew silent, the impact of her words sinking in. Even some among the media, trained to be jaded, seemed to be moved. Her emotional honesty combined with evidentiary facts created a compelling case that could not be minimized as a simple personal grievance. During a brief recess, reporters swarmed outside, taking responses eagerly. Meri Brown's court appearance is dominating social media. One reporter tweeted, images of her saying, "Enough is enough," went viral, trending on websites with tens of thousands of shares. Inside the courtroom, Cody's attorneys shifted gears. They introduced a witness, attempting to provide a counter-narrative. The witness spoke of past decisions and intentions, emphasizing trust in Cody's judgment. Yet each statement seemed less impactful compared to Meri's meticulously documented and emotionally compelling testimony. Meri's attorney, noticing this, prepared a concise rebuttal. When it was their turn, they presented a series of comparative charts showing Cody's financial decisions versus documented family needs, highlighting gaps and inconsistencies. Meri herself commented, explaining in clear, easy, to understand language how these decisions had real-world impacts in the world outside. The judge nodded, taking abundant notes, clearly examining the broader scenario instead of just numbers. "Miss Brown, your testimony has been both complete and riveting. The court appreciates the detailed evidence and clarity you've provided," he said. By the end of the session, Meri had reinforced her position. Her testimony combined emotional truth with documented facts, leaving little room for misinterpretation. Social media buzzed outside, news outlets got wind of the story, and public opinion squarely rallied behind her call for accountability. Her words were simple but moving. Enough is enough, and the court must act in the interest of fairness and protection of the family. As hearing resumed after recess, the atmosphere in the courtroom imperceptibly shifted. Observers noted a change in demeanor. Even Cody appeared more reserved, realizing the gravity of Meri's testimony. The energy that Meri had brought in the morning seemed to have set the tone for the rest of the day. The judge called for the next segment, a detailed review of financial documents. Rows of printed spreadsheets and bank statements were laid out before the court, each meticulously annotated by Meri's team. She guided the judge and jury through the documents, highlighting instances where funds were allocated without proper approval or documentation. "Your Honor, this is the transfer on the 7th of June 2019, she detailed. This amount, nearly $120,000, was moved without notice to the other parties, having direct consequences on family expenditures and obligations. These are not minor oversights. These are continual patterns." Her calm yet firm delivery contrasted sharply with the defense's attempts to portray these actions as miscommunications. Meri's consistency and attention to detail drew nods from the judge and murmurs of agreement from the courtroom observers. The media present from all angles continued to have their cameras trained on her, commenting on the combination of professionalism and passion in her delivery. Videos of her explaining complex financial arrangements in accessible language were going viral, drawing in audiences far beyond the normal Sister Wives fanbase. Cody's attorney attempted a line of questioning designed to diminish the impact of Meri's evidence, suggesting that decisions were made collectively or that documentation had been misinterpreted. Meri responded with unwavering clarity, showing time-stamped emails and receipts. "These documents speak for themselves," she said. "There is no ambiguity. Decisions were made unilaterally, and the effects were felt by everyone involved, especially the children." There was a pause of unchecked feeling. Meri stopped, her voice trembling slightly but still level even as she continued. "I have always tried to maintain peace, to protect the family," she said. "But there comes a point where not taking silence is a decision no longer. It is a necessity. Enough is enough." The courtroom collectively gasped. Her testimony was not just a statement, but a call for accountability and transparency as well. Even those who might have doubted her credibility were visibly stirred. After her testimony, the judge signaled that the court would take a brief adjournment to review the presented materials in detail. This break gave the attorneys a chance to regroup, but the momentum clearly favored Meri. Social media erupted, with clips of her statement trending under hashtags emphasizing accountability, justice, and family integrity. Outside the courtroom, supporters gathered, expressing admiration for Meri's courage. "She is standing up for what is right, not just for her, but for her children," wrote one supporter. "This is what accountability looks like," wrote another. No more silence. By the time court reconvened for the final segment, the air was charged with anticipation. Everyone knew this was the segment where years of unresolved drama, emotional strain, and battles over money would be boiled down into a court decision. Meri entered the courtroom with her usual placid demeanor, yet a determined glint was in her eyes. She had made her statement, and now it was the court's decision to make. The judge addressed the courtroom, acknowledging the complexity of the case. "We have heard lengthy testimony, reviewed financial documents, and weighed all the evidence given. It is clear that the issues before us are more than simple misunderstandings." Cody's defense team attempted one last appeal, arguing that Meri's statements were emotionally charged and therefore biased. But the court had already seen the meticulous documentation supporting her claims, and her calm, logical presentation had left little room for doubt. Then, in a moment that would define this trial, the judge directly referenced Meri's emotional testimony. "Miss Brown, your words today were not only powerful but necessary. They highlighted the reality of these proceedings and the impact on those most affected, the family. The court recognizes the validity and gravity of your concerns." A hush fell over the courtroom. Cameras captured Meri's subtle exhale of relief, a quiet acknowledgement that her voice had been heard. The judge continued, summarizing the financial discrepancies, unilateral decisions, and the emotional toll borne by the family. "The evidence supports the need for accountability and corrective measures. This court finds that appropriate remedies must be applied to restore fairness and transparency within this family's financial arrangements." The ruling, though complex and detailed, essentially sided with Meri's assertions. Measures were put in place to ensure equitable financial management, including audits, oversight, and clearly defined responsibilities for all parties. While this did not erase the past, it established a framework for future accountability and protection for those previously disadvantaged. As the gavel fell, Meri quietly retraced the journey that had led her there. Decades of restraint, pain, and determination had been condensed into this affirmation of her character and courage. In the corridor outside the court, supporters cheered, social media buzzed with footage of her testimony, and the story quickly went viral, captivating audiences worldwide. In the aftermath, Meri expressed her perspective to reporters. "This isn't about winning or losing, it's about doing what's right. Enough is enough, and today we've taken a step toward fairness and respect for everyone in this family." Her message went beyond the short-term drama of the Sister Wives narrative. It was a testament to the power of speaking truth to power, standing firm in the midst of opposition, and struggling for justice, even when the barriers seem impossible. As the courtroom emptied and the media vans left, one thing was sure: Meri Brown had not only surprised the courtroom with her testimony, she had rewritten the script on accountability, bravery, and resilience, and left an indelible impression on all those who had witnessed this amazing story unfold.